When I first saw Subnautica, I thought it looked like some low-budget Unity project. The bubbly text on the main menu, the water, it all just looked cheap to me. It put me off playing Subnautica for years. I had no idea what the game actually was because, frankly, I never looked past the surface impression. But that's fitting, because that's exactly what Subnautica wants you to do: underestimate what's beneath the surface. When I finally gave it a chance, I expected a typical survival game. Gather some resources, build some stuff, stay alive, nothing special. But as soon as I hit the water, something shifted. The music kicked in, the light bent strangely, and it felt like I was descending into something far bigger, far darker than I'd anticipated. It starts with a crash. You're stranded on an alien ocean planet, floating alone in a battered life pod. You scramble to get your bearings, fires are breaking out, systems are failing, and the pod feels like it's moments away from imploding. But somehow it holds together. This fragile, humming capsule becomes your base of operations. Everything starts here.
You have suffered minor head trauma.
When you first climb out and swim on the surface, it almost feels plain. The Aurora, your crashed ship, looms in the distance like a broken monument. But there's something else. Just endless, empty ocean. It's barren, and it feels like there's nothing to see. That's deliberate, because everything Subnautica wants you to feel, the fear, the tension, the wonder, lies beneath the surface. And the moments that you dive down, you realise how insignificant you really are. This isn't just a survival game. Subnautica is a horror game, an exploration game, a game about isolation, all in one. And by the time that you reach the depths, you realise it's not the monsters or the darkness that leave the biggest mark, it's the journey itself. Subnautica began as an early access game, released in December 2014. At first, people called it underwater Minecraft. That comparison made sense. You gathered resources, crafted tools, built bases, a sci-fi survival sandbox, but underwater. But over time, something else started to surface. The developers, Unknown Worlds, updated the game monthly. Each update added something new. Vehicles like the Cyclops, creatures like the Reaper Leviathan, and the horror elements started creeping in. Not by design initially. Jonas Patel, one of the developers, even admitted that they never intended it to be a horror game. But as players explored the depths, they noticed how naturally terrifying the underwater world really was. Reviewers picked up on it too. IGN called it legitimately terrifying. Players kept mentioning how tense and oppressive it felt. The developers leaned into it, making each update reinforce that sense of vulnerability. By the time that it fully released in 2018, Subnautica wasn't just another survival game. It had built a reputation, a survival game that also happened to be one of the most quietly terrifying experiences that you could have. When you start the game, it's just you. No NPCs, no friendly faces, just the ocean. And unlike other survival games, land is sparing. There seems to be no land, no outposts to stumble across, no villagers to trade with. From the surface, it doesn't even look particularly interesting until you dive down. That first dive hooks you. Suddenly you're surrounded by colour, coral reefs, strange creatures. It feels alive, but you're constantly aware of how fragile you are. Your oxygen meter ticking down, your tools basic, no clear direction. The game gives you glimmers of hope. Radio messages crackle through your pod, hinting that other survivors might be out there. Each message marks a new point to investigate, a chance you might not be alone. I remember getting those first few messages. Every time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, someone else had survived. But every time I arrived at the wrecked pods, there was nothing but silence. The pods torn open, long abandoned. No bodies, no explanations. Just the sea reclaiming everything. It becomes clear those voices from the radio are ghosts, and you're still completely alone. Building my own base didn't fix the isolation either. If anything, it amplified it. Inside the base, the music cuts out. All you hear is the mechanical hum of the life support systems. It's sterile, lifeless. Outside you have the sounds of marine life, the music of the world. Inside, it's just you and the machinery keeping you alive. I built my first base in the coral reef, the safest, most vibrant part of the game. I even added windows so I could look out and see the life moving around me. But inside, it felt hollow. No matter how much I built, there was still no one else there. Even in its safe areas, Subnautica never lets you feel truly safe. It keeps you unsettled in subtle ways. You'll hear distant roars, something huge moving out of sight. Sometimes it's peaceful, a massive reefback whale groaning as it swims by, harmless but enormous. Other times it's something that you can't see, but you feel it, a presence lurking in the shadows. Early on, I remember knocking loose pieces of limestone and suddenly being chased by a small fish that exploded like a grenade if I wasn't fast enough. Even the creatures in the coral reef seemed to be aggressive, twitchy, unpredictable. And as always, there's the oxygen meter ticking away at the corner of your vision. Every dive is a balance. How far can you go before you risk drowning? That constant tension never really leaves you. The sound design is key. Above water, everything feels barren, but underwater, it's layered. Echoes of distant creatures, strange clicks and hums, the muffled thud of something enormous. And visually, it's stunning but claustrophobic. Light filters down in ribbons, but the deeper you go, the more that it fades. Shadows lengthen, the floor drops away, and you're left with the black void beneath you. You see the Aurora crash site glowing faintly in the distance, a reminder that something catastrophic happened, but no clear answers. Try to get too close and radiation forces you back. It's beautiful, but deadly. Subnautica never lets you forget that. Subnautica isn't marketed as a horror game, but it doesn't need to be. It uses every horror technique without needing to call itself one. For me, the horror wasn't just the big creatures, it was how the game weaponizes sound, space, and your own imagination. The first giant creatures I encountered were those reefbacks, the massive whales that emit deep, foghorn-like sounds. You hear them long before you see them, and when you finally catch a glimpse, they're peaceful, almost majestic. You can even mine resources from their backs. It lulls you into thinking maybe the big things aren't so bad. But then comes the Reaper Leviathan. The first time I met one, I was exploring near the Aurora in my sea moth. Everything felt too quiet. Then I heard this guttural roar, and before I could react, my camera jolted violently. The Leviathan had grabbed the front of my sea moth, cracking the glass, shaking it like a toy. It wasn't a fight, it wasn't even a chase, it was sheer panic. I had to get out of there immediately. And from that moment on, I never explored without constantly listening for sounds, always aware that something might be lurking just out of view. But honestly, the encounters that stuck with me the most weren't the Leviathans. They were the wreck dives. Scattered throughout the ocean floor, fragments of the Aurora and other wrecked ships lie waiting to be explored. Tight corridors, pitch black, completely submerged. You swim in, hoping to find valuable technology, but almost immediately, you lose your bearings. Every second feels like a race against your oxygen. You're hunting for blueprints, trying to memorize your path, all while knowing you might not be able to find the exit before you run out of air. More than once I had to retreat, panicked, disorientated, because the tension got too much. I'd have to build up the nerve to go back in, bit by bit, remembering just a little more each time. These wrecks weren't random site areas. They were some of the most intense, claustrophobic moments I'd ever had in a video game. Subnautica feeds your curiosity whilst constantly reminding you how small you are. Every upgrade, Every tool that you craft feels like a victory, but it's never quite enough. Early on, I hesitated to leave the coral reef. It felt safer there. I wanted to build up my base, stockpile resources, stay close to what I knew. But that urge to explore kept nagging at me. I remember the moment clearly. I swam further out, and suddenly the seabed vanished beneath me, a black void stretching endlessly. I couldn't see the bottom anymore, just darkness, and yet something compelled me to dive deeper. At first, it was all about survival. I needed resources. I needed oxygen. I needed to upgrade. But the more I played, the more I wanted to see what lay beyond the safe zones. What else was hiding in the dark? Eventually, I stumbled upon a group of massive legged creatures, the sea treaders. They walked along the ocean floor, breaking apart rocks beneath their feet, revealing precious materials like diamonds and gold. That was when it really hit me. The world was vast, layered, filled with unique biomes and secrets that you wouldn't find unless you pushed yourself further. And yet, every step forward made me more aware of how unprepared I was. The deeper I went, the more I realised I needed better tech, longer oxygen supplies, better vehicles, more storage. I had grand plans of building bases all over the map to leapfrog between, but the dream faded quickly. It became clear that the ocean wouldn't make it that easy. Getting the sea moth changed everything. Suddenly I wasn't swimming on borrowed time. I had my own little submarine, my own mobile oxygen supply. It opened up the world. Even though the deeper I went, the more vulnerable I felt. I could dive deeper, yes, but I still had to constantly mind the crush depth, the oxygen, the threats I couldn't see. That delicate balance of freedom and fear never left. Every dive was a risk. The real turning point came when I discovered the Lost River. I first stumbled upon it in my sea moth, but I couldn't stay long. I could only go so deep before the pressure forced me back. I remember reaching this enormous glowing underwater tree, a blue ethereal structure in the middle of a cavern. It felt like I'd reached the edge of the world, but I knew that there was more beneath. I just didn't have the tools to get there. That became my obsession. I needed the Cyclops. I needed the prawn suit. I needed to be able to bring my entire life support system down with me and finally see what was at the bottom. Piloting the Cyclops through the Lost River felt like operating a war machine. It was massive, powerful, but not invincible. Parts of the river were tight, narrow, claustrophobic. I had to use every tool, quiet mode to sneak past a ghost leviathan, cameras to help me maneuver, defensive measures when I felt concerned. And then there was the weight of what I was carrying. The Cyclops felt like a mobile home. I kept everything important in it, my resources, my upgrades, my prawn suit docked safely inside. But every time that I pushed deeper, I wondered, what if it breaks? What if I lose everything in here? When I reached the threshold, the lava zone, it felt like the point of no return. I parked the Cyclops in the tightest, most precarious spot I could manage and took the prawn suit down instead. By then, something had shifted in me. I realised that I wasn't exploring because I wanted to finish the game. I was exploring because I didn't want it to end. That's the realisation Subnautica gave me. The journey matters more than the goal. The deeper I went, the closer I got to the end, the more I missed those early moments. The uncertainty, the tension, the endless possibilities. I feel that the game mirrors life in that way. You spend so much time chasing upgrades, pushing forward, trying to complete things. But once the end is in sight, you realise that it wasn't all about that. It was about those moments of panic when you lost your bearings inside a wreck, the quiet unease inside your own base, the awe of seeing a reefback drift by overhead, the relief of finding oxygen just in time. By the time that I'd finished Subnautica, I wasn't thinking about the story. I was thinking about how it made me feel. Lost, small, curious, alive. And honestly, that's why it became one of my favourite games of all time, because even when it terrified me, it reminds me that the unknown isn't something to fear, it's something to explore. And the funny thing is, while Subnautica made me realise how much the journey mattered more than the destination, it also got me thinking about how often that we look backwards, chasing old memories, trying to relive moments that we've already passed. That's something that I've talked about before, how nostalgia can feel like a comfort and a trap. If that idea resonates with you, I've made a whole video exploring it in more depth. You might find it hits the same nerve. Thanks for listening.